Good morning. Céad míle fáilte go Gaillimh, Capital of Culture 2020 and Capital of BIM in Ireland. I'm glad Alan is here to hear that. I was going to speak to you in Irish, but I thought better of it and felt that perhaps I should make all my usual mistakes in English. In the future, when we're all digital, there won't be any such mistakes. My job this morning is basically to talk to you about what RPS have been doing, what type of choices we have to make if we want to change, advance, and work in the digital space. And interestingly, you know, the comment has already been made about BIM. I like to think about it, and we like to think about it, as information management. It started with building information management, but it's not really about buildings anymore. That's just one small part of the whole area. There was a news flash this morning, I'm told. Boris was on the TV again. He now has a single objective, I'm told, which is to introduce a new Brexit syllabus to schools in the UK. Brexit syllabus is in 4 parts. Starts with backstops for beginners, borders for beginners, how to lose 11-0, and all empires end in failure. So the digital empire had better not end in failure. Digital is disruptive. I think that's the first thing I'd have to say. So if you're going into the digital space, you're going into a space which is going to be an agent of change in your business and in how you do your business and how you operate your processes. So in RPS, we've been on a journey for about 10 years at this stage, a few false starts. But to give you a teaser of the type of things we do, I'll just let this run for about half a minute or so. This project has been constructed, and this is a fully accurate dimensional model of part of a junction. This is a project that's just got through planning. A wind farm, that's Carlingford Loch. This is a nearport baggage hall in Australia. Survey is on your right. And that is a major commercial centre in the centre of Sydney in Australia. So all of those are digital, fully accurate models built here in Galway by a team specialising in digital. So just to move on, so that's the context I'm talking in. So RPS, just a little bit about us. We've about 6,500 staff. We operate in Ireland, UK, Norway, Australia, Netherlands, US, Canada. In Ireland, we have 700 staff. In Galway, we have about 140 staff and still growing, and we're based in this office building in the IDA Park in Meriview. In terms of numbers, in the 4 offices in Southern Ireland, we have 462 people, very modern office, lots of collaborative working spaces, places, etc. Why did we look at digital, and what's the benefit of looking at digital? Well, we are consulting engineers that operate not just in the consulting engineering space, but in project management, in planning, in environmental assessment, project communications. And if you look at being an accredited company. In the Engineers Ireland have a CPD framework, and within that, transformational is where we all want to be. In other words, we want to be adapting, changing, be a learning organisation. And to do that, we need to be in that transformational space. The roadmap, well, these have been published, the NBC, Building Ireland's Future. There are other activities, some of which I've heard very little from, such as the BIM Council. Not quite sure what they're doing or contributing at this point. But go back to digital design and look at where it has come from. When I started work, it was a T-square and drafting board. Then it went to AutoCAD and CAD around the end of the 80s, early 90s. Then BIM came along subsequently. This is a map done by Bew and Richards, and it's as valid today as it was the day it was done. And what it showed is that as technology evolves and as the tools become available, that progress can be made, and very significant progress. And in our industry, which is the architecture, engineering, and construction industry, it's been a segmented or siloed industry for many, many years. The employer, the consultants, architects, engineers, QSs, the contractors, the subcontractors, the operator, the asset owner, all sit in different places. And communication and sharing of information has never been a feature, partly because the tools didn't exist, but they now do exist. And the question is, can we use them? Are we equipped to use them? Are we smart enough? Are we educating our people enough? So what we see is that it's either adapt and lose out or become obsolete. Those two choices. Interestingly, I was at an event a couple of weeks ago where people were talking about the future of engineering and architecture. And the conclusion of that was that about 50% of the work that we as consultants typically do will now be automated within about 10 years. So if you put that in front of you and you say, if half our work is going to be automated in 10 years, what are we going to be doing? The companies that adapt will be doing the 50% that remains and may well be doing other services. But if we don't adapt, we're going to become basically producers of commodities. And many of those processes will be automated, so it'll be pretty easy to automate some of them. So how did we set about this? We set out to work with our own supply chain, talk to our clients, work with their supply chains, seek to convince them of the value of going digital and operating in the digital space. Clearly, as the IT world has developed, models which need to be interoperable are now being cloud-based and hosted in the cloud and with multi-user access to them. To do that, there has to be consistent processes, and we have to be agile. Basically, use whatever tools in terms of mobility and access, be it standing on site or elsewhere, are available, and look at projects from a complete life cycle point of view. If you can model a project fully, then you can model its life cycle, you can model its operating costs, you can model the changes, and if you have dimensionally accurate models, you can look at the whole life cycle costs, whereas the industry traditionally looked at build cost, seeks to minimize that, and then a couple of years on is modifying that solution. So there are demands that come with this change. But have things really changed? I'll let you ponder on that for a second. Do people appreciate automatically the benefits that come from large schemes. So we do large infrastructure. This might have been somebody who was very upset about something at the time. Edmund Burke was a famous Irish politician. But things haven't changed much in that there definitely is a culture of opposition. And when you have opposition, you can either identify what's the source of it and deal with it and reduce it as far as possible. And that involves a lot of communications activities. And here is one of the big advantages of digital, which is you can demonstrate visually, you can talk through, you can take a viewpoint and you can demonstrate what it looks like from their house or their business or how close they are to it. And that gives a fantastic opportunity to interact. Now, if you're going down the route, how do you give your client or your employer certainty? These are some of the certifications that we hold: quality, environmental management, health and safety, data security. Data security and data information is becoming the #1 concern of many clients. Standards for BIM itself, 1192 moving on to 19650. There's a lot of hard work required to achieve these. In our case, we achieved accreditation to ISO 19650 this year, and we're delighted with that. That's accepted internationally, and we're working internationally in Australia, USA, and elsewhere. Now, in terms of a digital journey, how do you get there? Part of it is that staff need training, education, we need to be innovative, we need to find opportunities. But that also brings us into new products. It brought us into working in Australia, working on HS2 in the UK. So in terms of our business, our Galway office has a series of international projects. And you would say, well, why Galway? Well, the reason it's out of Galway is because we have a very well-developed team of people who are very capable in the digital space. And it's possible to sell those skills into the US, into Australia, into the UK. So if you're good enough, you're not too far away anymore. There was a time when you couldn't do that because of the logistics. Getting to the point where we have centres of excellence, we're doing things smartly, and we're doing things well. A huge part of this was putting in place internal technical standards, developing with GMIT as our partner a higher level diploma in BIM, a level 8 diploma. And that has meant that within this region, there is now a supply into the market of well-trained graduates who have the appropriate skills to begin to work in this area. And when they begin to develop, when they begin to do project work, they have a lot of the basics, and the project work really brings them on. There's an approved program with the Building Research Establishment as well. That program has won numerous awards for education, for innovation, for academia-industry partnership. And it means recognition for the people involved and for the excellence they are achieving. So in terms of tools and technologies, the design teams that we have basically generate the models. Those models are often live now. We work entirely within 3D. So when a project arrives in, it's set up in 3D, and we work in that environment. People say, oh, but that's expensive. Yes, first time out it is expensive. Sometimes you have to bear a lot of extra costs to get there. But what you get as you go through a project is clearly advantageous and clearly allows you to manage any changes that are introduced, any scheduling issues, any issues that arise in terms of looking at alternatives and scenarios much better than previously. Virtual reality, digital twins, that allows people to actually see the product before it's actually built. You can do walkthroughs, demonstrations, and so on. It allows issues to be identified, not just the virtual reality. The virtual reality is the experience, but the actual models themselves and the detail. When you make a change, you can make it throughout all of the product you're providing. And we have to think not of producing drawings or specifications. We're producing a product, and that product has to be fit for purpose for its lifetime. QR codes, we can use that to allow people to smartly download information, etc. So how do we do it? Some of it is getting things like a common data environment in place. There are lots of issues around where you host the site, what your liabilities are, who owns the data, and they have to be managed. But your CDE becomes the source or reservoir of information. One thing I would say is that most data out there, I'm not talking about building data alone, I'm talking about data for every aspect of a project. That could be spatial data, it could be monitoring data, it could be any type of data needs to be managed. And within the model environment, all of that information needs to be structured. As a curiosity, how much of the data do you think that's collected at present is actively used either in monitoring projects or in the design process? And I've heard estimates of this by a number of organizations. 10%? Any higher offers? 4%? Apparently it's around 1%. 1% of data collected. That means that there's a huge gap between how people understand their asset is performing and what it was designed to do. And if you can close that gap, you can improve performance and you can improve value to the customer. So how do you do it? Basically, develop people, teams, etc. in the AEC space. So have a talent pipeline. You have to have leaders who can interact, communicate, certification to give certainty and assurance about the standards you're using, implement them consistently with good workflows and processes. And on workflows and processes, other industries, such as the medical devices industry, the pharma industry, the software industries, are very rigorous in the way they adhere to processes. Their certification depends on it. So if you're an FDA company and you get approval to manufacture a particular food product, or if you're a pharma company and you get a medicine approved, if you go outside the requirements, you have to take it off the market. We're heading in that direction in terms of processes for digital, rigorous processes that ensure that the models used are suitable. And that the information and the schedules and the quantities and everything else and costs generated from them are therefore more accurate. Collaboration. It's easy to talk about collaboration. In practice, it requires a lot of training and hard work. And where we will get value and where other consultants will get value is in applying our expertise to the benefit of our clients and the benefit of them in their projects. Aristotle said that excellence is not something we are born with. It is the habitual practices of form and the habits we embed. So if we behave like a donkey, we more than likely are a donkey. So somebody who thinks it's okay to adhere to 9 things out of 10 and do something different on the 10th, there is an immediate problem in the digital space. And that problem magnifies itself throughout the project. We need to see centres of excellence and smart objectives for teams. Why do we do this? Well, there's a whole series of reasons. Better staff engagement. The new generation is more interested in being well motivated. Retention helps. Digital attracts people. It adds value. When I say better fees, I don't mean lower fees. If you're doing a lot more work in the digital space to give someone 10% lower cost, there is a cost to that. Ultimately, there is a saving. It may not be an upfront saving. Project capital costs can reduce and life cycle costs. So now I'm going to get to a couple of videos that illustrate in a bit more detail what we do. I would say to you that the availability of sensory technology for monitoring and better quality surveying, such as point cloud and infrared and all of these other things. This is a survey of Gatwick Airport where we're doing a lot of work. But that is a key enabler to digital. So this is a project which you saw a little bit of the start. That was at concept stage when we commenced development. There was no EIR. BEP was agreed, and it's become a Transport Scotland exemplar project. So this is actually absolutely dimensionally accurate model of that scheme. And you can go into the model if they want to make changes, if they want to examine alternatives going forward, they will be able to look at them in the model and determine what needs to be done. I'll let this run for a few seconds and then I won't show you the full video. If you want to see the full video, you can see it outside at the desk afterwards. But this includes all the accurate topography, geometrics, everything. Okay, Gold Coast Airport. And this, why I am saying this is, going digital is an enabler to allow people to work in Ireland and do work elsewhere in the world, sell our services overseas. So this is an airport baggage hall. The movement of baggage through an airport has always been a problem because typically they think about how to configure the baggage handling as the airport grows, and therefore they have to realign their lines. It's like processing lines. So this is the survey on the left and the actual baggage hall and the movement of luggage through it. And every element, as you can see, M&E services, ventilation, electricals, everything had to be modeled here. And the beauty of this is that without physically having to go in and make changes, they can make the changes in the model and examine how it works. So I won't dwell on that. Again, you can see that outside. This is the MLC, this is a 70,000 square metre iconic building in the centre of Melbourne, or centre of Sydney. This was surveyed and modelled, surveyed in Australia and modelled here in Galway. Nobody ever set foot in Australia, but it will give you an idea. Sean, the Minister, was talking about shadow, noise, air pollution. All of the adjacent buildings here have been modelled based upon the survey. So proximity, you can imagine the use of a tool like this for communication around your project, talking to the planners, talking to your neighbours, talking to your tenants, etc. Now this is just a short clip from the beginning of it, but it goes right through the building in its full length. Okay, so you can see, you can go inside, but the level of detail you can pick up is incredible in this type of model. Now it moves into the internal of the building, but for the interest of time, I'll shorten it there. London Dart Parkway. This is an example of where an airport and a rail line didn't meet, and we've been involved in a project to put in a rail link. So that rail link and the movement of people, etc., is being modelled. This is a project to illustrate at planning stage what you can do. This project has been approved by An Bord Pleanála. It was one of the 10T priority routes that were commissioned in 2014, and this is the first one to go through the planning process and the only one to get approval to date. So this gives you the experience that you can illustrate to adjacent people or householders or businesses what it will actually look like. It shows the level of detail you can put into a model. So adapting and using all this technology on linear projects is potentially hugely beneficial to every party involved. Now, the geometry all works well. Do you see the glitch in the geometry? The speed bump as they come off the roundabout. So you can pick things up, even looking at a model like this. But this is showing landscaping is at 20 years maturity in this. So you can do all kinds of things. You can effectively, this is your digital twin. And your digital twin gives you so much extra information, and people take visual information in much higher than other types of information. So effectively, you can drive the route, you can experience what it looks like, etc. So a hugely powerful tool. This is a kind of a corridor that was surveyed, so you can see it there. Okay, move on. That's basically the overall picture I wanted to give to you. Just to say a final concluding word in terms of our industry. Worldwide, 14% of GDP worldwide is invested in architecture, engineering and construction. And it's a very fragmented industry. Getting it right first time, lean, off-site manufacturing, getting accuracy are absolutely critical. That means processes which can be built into this type of technology become more and more important, and we become process-driven with the end in mind and the life cycle in mind. To give you one example, HS2 in the UK, one section of it requires 152 bridges. In that section, 136 of the bridges are within, the length of them is within 5 meters of each other. The traditional approach would have been design 136 separate bridges, slightly different dimensions in spans, abutments, everything. By looking at it holistically, those 136 bridges can be made the same span with the same abutments, slightly different footings, can be prefabricated largely off-site, can be erected in half the time, etc. So the advantages of going this route are enormous. Thank you very much.